Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you guys once again for joining the Nine Innings podcast hosted by yours truly, Kevin Thompson, founder and CEO of Nine Capital Group. Thank you guys for joining us. As I always say, subscribe to the channel. As I always say, go and get my book, MLB to CFP, live on Apple and Amazon. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at info@ninecapitalgroup.com. Send us your questions. Go to the website at www.ninecapitalgroup.com. Schedule an appointment. As you know, we're here to do what? Educate, empower, engage, and also entertain. Today, we're talking about something that is timely and is important about what's going on in the current environment. But we're also talking about the rise of the US dollar and how it became such a stalwart. So today, we're talking about the dollar empire, how America made its currency the center of the world. You don't want to miss this episode. Let's get it. So the reason why I'm having this conversation today is because I recently came across a book called Choke Points by Edward Fishman. And this book, I'm going to say it's required reading. It's a wonderful expose of the economics of how sanctions work, the economics about economic warfare, the economics around how the globalization of our society has allowed us to pull and push levers without even dropping or dropping a bomb or shooting off a rocket. It's important to understand that. And because again, today we're going to specifically talk about the dollar empire. And by the way, the book was so good. I'm going to do like a 4 or 5 part series on all the different mechanics of how all this stuff operates. So today we're talking about the dollar empire, how the US dollar became the planet's most powerful economic tool. I know you've probably heard people talk about the de-dollarization. You hear, oh, Brazil and China are interacting in their own currencies. Well, that is somewhat of a problem. But before we get into all of that, I want you to understand why the dollar is so impactful from the get-go. So let's talk about where all this began, Bretton Woods and the blueprint for dominance. So I'm going to take you all the way back to 1944. World War II is still raging, but the U.S. invites 44 nations to a quiet room in New Hampshire. The goal here was this: design the post-war global economy. Out of this summit, they called it Bretton Woods, a system where world currencies were pegged to the U.S. dollar, and the dollar was pegged and backed by the U.S. gold reserves. The U.S. held most of the gold reserves, so naturally the dollar became the glue holding it all together. But here's the kicker. What many don't necessarily realize is back when Nixon became president in the 70s, actually roughly in 1971, Nixon took office and took us off the gold standard. What did that do? Well, it opened up our economy because now we have a fiat currency that's free floating against all these different currencies, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States economy. Many thought that the US dollar should have collapsed in credibility, but the reality is it didn't. Instead, it evolved. So that takes us to this: oil, Saudi Arabia, and the rise of petrodollars. In the 1970s were chaotic, man. We had inflation, gas lines, a spike in oil prices, but the US made a genius move. It negotiated with Saudi Arabia. They've priced their oil exclusively in USDs. In return, we sold them military equipment and security guarantees. See, that's how this stuff works. We sell these individuals security guarantees, we sell them military equipment, and they get access to certain things. He's all these things without taking a shot, right? This deal forced every country on earth to hold and use dollars to buy oil. That created demand for the US debt, kept interest rates low, and let America run massive deficits while the rest of the world funded us. The term came out of this was called petrodollars. That was born, and so was a new empire, one backed not by gold or tanks, but by oil, debt, and trust. You have to understand that how the United States became so powerful is the reason because when China does business, when any country does business, let's just say hypothetically China wants to buy something from Canada or China wants to buy something from a South American nation. They don't hold all of these different currencies in reserve. They don't hold pesos, they don't hold Thai bahts, they don't hold all these different currencies. What they do, what we do have is United States dollars. So what happens is they send money to the United States. The United States in turns changes those to dollars. So renminbi becomes dollars. And now those dollars go and buy pesos, or those dollars go and buy Thai bahts, or those dollars go and buy Swiss franc, or those dollars buy what have you. That's the nation. That's the rationale of having a world reserve currency, because the central banks of all these other countries don't necessarily have to hold all of these other currencies to do business. The United States dollar just becomes that much easier for the globalization and the movement of economics around the globe. So let's talk about today's numbers, the dollar by the digits. Fast forward to today, 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars. You heard that right. 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are in USDs. 70% of global debt is denominated in the USD or dollars. 90% of currency trades involve the US dollar. And yet, America only accounts for 25% of the global GDP. So you're asking me, Kevin, how does that math work? How does that make any sense? Because the dollar isn't just a currency. It's a system of trust, legal contracts, liquidity, and power. If you want to trade, invest, or borrow, or protect your assets globally, you need US dollars, like I just mentioned. It's like a toll road you have to go through to get anywhere. So let's get to the crux of this. Why does this matter and why it's under fire? So the dollar's dominance gives the US enormous leverage. Let me tell you that. You want to sanction Iran, freeze its dollar-based assets. You want to punish Russia, cut it off from SWIFT, the messaging system for the dollar transactions. Cut it off from the global economy. Hit their economy where it hurts. There's these USDs that they can basically say, okay, well, if Russia wants to do something, let's just make it harder for them to do it. Say, for example, it's an oil trade or an oil transaction. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to sanction those companies that are doing business in Russia, in Iran, force them not to do business or force them to raise their prices. So when Russia or Iran or whatever, or whomever's doing something out there that we don't like, we can basically raise their cost where they get less money, or raise the cost of doing business, for example, of insuring their oil vessels. It makes the cost of doing business and it hits their economy. So here's the rub. This kind of power makes the rest of the world nervous. It's beginning to make the rest of the world nervous because the United States is seen as politicizing its dollar, using it for leverage, using it to move things, move the needle in certain areas. After 2014 sanctions, Russia started moving out of US dollars. China is pushing for yuan-based trading systems. India and Saudi Arabia are experimenting with non-dollar oil transactions, and platforms like BRICS are trying to design alternatives. The question isn't whether the dollar will collapse, it's whether America's political use of the dollar will push allies and rivals to build something else. You're already starting to see it. China, Brazil, partnerships, strategic partnerships around the globe, fracturing the sanctions and fracturing the Americans' ability to place sanctions on their economy and to make them bend and do things that they don't necessarily want to do. So, this is the first of it, but what do we make of all of this? The dollar became dominant not by chance, by design. Bretton Woods, petrodollars, and Wall Street's global reach created a network that everyone now depends on. But the very power that built this empire might now be testing its limits. If money is the new missile, then the dollar is still the biggest warhead, but others are quietly building their own. Thank you guys for listening to this powerful episode. I'm going to have multiple sections of this, very quick hits. I'm not going to just go do an hour-long session. It's going to be multiple sessions. Today we talked about the dollar's dominance. The next episode, we're going to be looking at sanctions as warfare, how freezing bank accounts became more powerful than launching missiles. Thank you guys for listening. Subscribe to the 9 Innings podcast. Go and get my book, MLB to CFP, live on Apple and Amazon. You have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at info@ninecapitalgroup.com. Send us your questions. Go to the website at www.ninecapitalgroup.com. Schedule an appointment. As you know, we're here to do what? Educate, empower, engage, and also entertain. Follow us on all social media channels at 9ICAP and at MLB to CFP. Today we talked about the dollar, the dominance of the dollar, and why it may be under fire. The dollar empire, how America made its currency the center of the world. Thank you guys. Stay humble, stay safe, my friends. I'll see you again soon.